Yo, what is up, world? Welcome back to another episode of the Film School Experience. This week, we're going to be talking to Marcos Villarreal, and he actually graduated from Humboldt State University, which is way up north. And he got his bachelor's degree there in filmmaking. So I'm excited to get into this conversation because not everyone chooses to go to this school as a filmmaker. Some of you probably have never even heard of it. So I'm excited to talk about the smaller film school experience versus the bigger film school experience. And also we kind of explore the answer of, is it worth it to go to a smaller film school? Are you missing out on certain things that you would at a bigger film school? And so much more. This week we are talking to Marcos Villarreal, and he just so happens to be a cinematographer, director, and producer. He wears many hats, and you'll learn why because his film school experience kind of required that he did wear many hats. So again, we are talking about the small film school experience versus the large film school experience. So that is this week's conversation. I'm really excited to talk to Marcos because he is one of my really close friends, and he actually is the catalyst as to why I'm a filmmaker today. He showed me some things way back when we were in a community college together, and ever since I saw what he showed me, it blew my mind, and I just instantly wanted to become a filmmaker and learn the things that he was doing, as well as the many more things that I saw on YouTube. So I hope that you're relaxed and at ease because this week's podcast is about to begin now. Okay, and camera is rolling.
Sound speed.
This is the Film School Experience.
Take one apple and action.
So, Marcos, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks.
Really appreciate you
Thanks for having me
being
here.
here.
Yeah.
And we're excited to hear about your journey as a filmmaker at film school and how that was in general.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
I guess my first question is, who are you and what film school did you graduate from? And you can get as deep as you want or as shallow as you want with that.
Okay. Who is me? My name's Marcos. Yeah, Marcos. Yeah. I was gonna say my last name, but it's very hard for me, as you know, to pronounce my last name. Yeah, it's terrible. I know I'm a monster. But yeah, my name is Marcos. I went to Humboldt State University, and they had a film program in there, and I joined there after switching from poli-sci as a major.
Whoa, wow. So you weren't like dedicated into film
No, not at all.
from the jump.
No.
That's interesting.
It was kind of like a thing that I didn't know was a career choice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So you didn't know that it was a career choice. That's so funny because you were one of the first people that had ever showed me editing, like non-linear editing. And it was a video that you showed me that you made at your house. It was eating ice cereal.
Oh, yes, the ice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Full of ice.
Full of ice. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so we both went to the same community college. And I remember seeing that and just being like amazed at like, this is what you can do.
That's funny. Yeah, because like I didn't know what I was doing at the time, right? Most of the stuff I was like inspired by was from a YouTuber, Freddie Wong, if you're familiar with him. Yeah. So when I first saw his stuff on YouTube, and this is I think the early age of YouTube where it started like blowing up in like this kind of field of medium where people are just like, oh, we can put short films on here. So I started going like what's a rabbit hole into his stuff. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. I want to do stuff like this. So that's where it kind of stemmed off of, was because of Freddie Wong and his YouTube and like how he just made fun movies.
No, that's awesome. And I think a lot of us growing up in that generation are very aware of who Freddie Wong was and like the types of videos that he made. And even for me, watching that back then, I was super inspired myself. So I think it's really interesting how you said, like going to film school was never the plan, was never the goal.
Definitely not. Going to school in general was never the plan. Like after high school, terrible in school, hated it. Only kept a 2-point GPA just to play sports. Yeah. So was not a fan of school. Didn't try to go to college until graduating high school. Went to COS for a semester, dropped out. I was like, nah, I'm not. This is dumb. And then spending a year working at retail, I was like, okay, I need to go back. I need to do something because retail sucks. People suck. Customers suck. I don't want to be anywhere near this.
Right. No, that's totally fair. So we're at Humboldt University,
Yes.
where you get accepted, but you're there for politics. So poli-sci to be exact. So at what point were you like, I need to jump ship? And like, luckily Humboldt has a film program. Like, what was it for you that really was like the last domino?
Yeah. So I was like already like 3 months into the semester, right? I was joining all these clubs when I first got to Humboldt. I didn't really know anybody except for like the people that I ran cross country at COS with. So I was hanging out with them, but I was taking all these poli sci classes. So I joined a club, a poli sci club, and then started like working for them or as one of the club members. And I was there for all my years at Humboldt. Even after I jumped ship into filmmaking, I kept part of the club. So I would help canvas one of the local congressmen, Jared Huffman, out there, and did all that fun jazz. And but like 3 months in, I started realizing like, oh, politics is kind of depressing, very depressing, because all the teachers were going into like the depressing aspect of it. So I was like, oh shit, is this? And then all my peers, all my classmates were way into politics than I was. So I was like, is this for me? So is this for me? So I had like this like mental breakdown of like, oh shit, should I just drop out or like what the fuck? Oh, sorry for cussing. Yeah. Okay. Um, so I was like, what the heck? And then I called one of my friends, as you know, Gabby. So she was like a really good homie. I ran cross country with her. So I called her one night. I was like, I don't know what to do. She's like, why don't you do something in film? You like doing videos? And I was like, oh shit, I didn't think that was a possibility. I just did it just because it was fun. It's something I like to do. I was like, oh, this is cool. Make a little short video. Put it out. So I looked on the website in Humboldt and see if they had a film program. They did. They just started up maybe 3 or 4 years prior to me going there. Um, so yeah, prior to that, they had a big film program back in the day, and then they stopped it, and they just recently brought it back. So I was lucky enough to be in that like time pocket where they're just getting into like the steam of things. So I went to my professor, or not my professor at the time, to have a meeting, and they're like, "Why do you want to do filmmaking?" And I was like, I told him, I was like, "Well, I was in politics, but like filmmaking seems like this is why I kind of did this when I was like in high school and like community college." They're like, "All right, you seem fine. We'll get you a couple classes and see how you like it, and if you're good to go." So that was like all that was history right there.
Wow, that was a turning point. That's really awesome. And it's funny. I find myself, I didn't realize that I had a passion for filmmaking until I started to look. Like I knew I was doing certain things,
Yeah.
taking photos and then like watching your videos, being inspired by you. But it for me at least, and it sounds like for you as well, like it didn't take, like it wasn't you that was a motivation for switching. Sometimes it's outwardly, like maybe it's a friend who's like, hey, like you should really like look into that
Yeah.
and explore it.
And honestly, I think it's where we grew up too. Like media was something no one really thought about, right? Like we might have like an inclination. It's like, oh, this is cool. We like to watch it, but there was no one out here pushing, oh, you should go into like media, because we're all agriculture based out here. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of people's experiences are probably very similar who don't come from the film industry, meaning like anywhere near Los
yeah,
Angeles, where like this stuff is. I remember telling my dad that I was going to film school, and he's like, "Oh, you're going to become the next newscaster."
oh snap,
And
yeah,
that was like the perception of
uh,
how it is out here.
yeah. It's
Living and growing up in the
no one
valley.
really thinks of like big Hollywood, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's the last thing people think
yeah,
about.
dude.
Yeah.
This is the last thing they're like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. There's a whole business behind it.
It's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, you switch over from poli science into a film major at Humboldt, and what was your expectations, or what were you expecting to learn from the film program? Like, what did you think it would do for you?
Honestly, had no idea. I was going in blind, honestly. And it's crazy because I did have a firm foundation of like filmmaking, because like, without even realizing it, we were doing stuff, and you helped me on a few of my like small projects I was working on. And I realized I was already into experimental films back then. And that's a lot of my work is experimental stuff, as you know. So it was already implanted. Um, oh shoot, what was it? I forgot.
No,
What,
no,
yeah,
you're good. It's
yeah.
totally fine. But like, what did you think?
Oh, the expectation.
Yeah, the
Right? Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
expectations.
sorry.
Yeah,
I
no,
got
you're good.
caught up.
No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Honestly, I had no really expectation. I was like, I'm just gonna shoot from the hip from here. I think I think where I was getting at, I'm sorry, what I was getting at is doing all these like short projects and learning from Freddie Wong, and then because he always does his breakdowns after each video, right? So I would always watch his breakdowns after each video. I was like, oh, this is how they do it because they did a lot of VFX stuff, and I was like, I can't do that. So it was like a pipe dream of mine to like do stuff. So most of my time was just like imagining like coming up with scenes like what would Freddie do because like I had no idea what VFX and like it looked way too complicated for me at the time, you know, and I didn't have the computer or anything to even handle a program like that, you know.
No, that's cool. Like, some people's entry point to like what the film school will do for them, it always varies, of course. And, same with me, and I think with you as well. Like, we had open eyes and expectations to like what to learn, and I don't think I was looking for anything specific
Yeah,
when I joined or when I started film school, but I was just excited for whatever it was.
I mean, you can relate. We're like sponges, right? Yeah, we're just soaking in everything we can, you know. And and you too, like in film school with CSUN and USC, you're constantly working on projects nonstop, even outside of school, you know. Same way with me. Even though I was doing like projects in school, I was constantly searching outside what I can do. So I was constantly like, hey, I remember going into acting 101 class, and I was going to take acting 101, but I didn't get a chance to take it because of conflicts, whatever. But I still went in the class. I went to the professor, hey, can I like announce like an announcement? Because there's a bunch of actors. I was like, hey, I'm Marcos. I'm part of the film department program. If you need any videos or anything, let me know. I'm more happy to like, shoot something. So one woman, her name's Natalie, and she was a ballet dancer, and she does like the ropes, ballet, like the ropes, yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know the name
Like
of
silk
it, but I know
ropes,
what you're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
So she wanted to do a reel. I was like, yeah, I can do it for you. So I got two of my friends to help me do. We did a multicam thing, and we went to the forest, and then we had a place where she did the silks, and I had my other friend edit it. So, um, but yeah, I was constantly trying to like keep doing stuff, like even outside of film school.
Right. No, that's awesome. And that's something that I think is like embedded as a film student is like you're so in love with the craft and what you're learning in school and in class, and then you find a way to like exhibit that outside. So it leads me to my next question. Like, what was your living situation like up in Humboldt? And then how did you balance like your work life and then class assignments? What did that look like for you?
So, as you know, growing up, I was never like education was very difficult for me. So like even at COS, like the work life balance was like like terrible, because I was also doing cross country and track. So when I went up there, my living situation, I found an apartment. I went like a month early. I was staying with a friend to look for an apartment. Found an apartment. Um, put the money down for deposit and stuff. And luckily, like my dad and my mom helped me with that aspect, which is nice. But yeah, I lived in that apartment for about 3 years, my whole time there. But it all came from like a lot of help came from student loans. I took a lot of student loans out. That is for sure.
Same here. I 100% feel that
Yeah.
for sure. So like, did you have a consistent job?
Oh yeah, no. So when I first went out there, I got a job working at a hotel. But this was I was doing poli sci. So I was working at Holiday Inn Express in Eureka, and so after school I would go. I was working about 40 hours a week. Um, yeah, and because I worked at the Marriott here in town in our hometown. So I was like, so they paid me a little extra, but they give me 40 hours. And the thing I didn't like about them, I couldn't study. Like, so I would have like the night shifts, and like they're like, you can't study, you can't do this, you have to like be here, you can't take breaks and stuff. So like it was one day after a poli sci class, I was like, no, I need it because poli sci was kicking my ass because there was a lot more. It was more in depth than SEOS. I was taking I was taking a theory class, and that was very interesting. And I took like oh what a bill class, not a bill. I forget. It's been a minute now since I've been out of college. It was to write reports for Congress people. So if there's like, if I was a scientist and I'm doing like a CRS report, and it would say like, oh, global warming or whatever is causing, here's all the information you need. So it's like a packet. So we're learning how to read packets and like give those to like politicians and stuff. Um, So it was a lot in debt. So like I was very overwhelmed. So like it was one day after class, after one of the classes, my poli sci, I called my work, the holiday. I was like, hey, I'm not coming in today, and I'm probably not going to come in after all. From there, so I just quit there and just really focused on school. And then when I switched to filmmaking, I just focused on filmmaking, and doing like side jobs here and there. So I got to work on a commercial out there. I got to work on a feature film for Disney, as like just a PA, nothing too crazy. It was like my foot in the door. So it was for Wrinkle in Time.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
right. I remember you
yeah,
telling me about that.
yeah. So I got like a few days on there. Like the first couple of days was just getting all the crew luggage and putting into the rooms in the hotel, and they had bought out all three hotels in the town.
Dang,
Yeah,
all three of
all
them.
three
That's
hotels. Yeah.
amazing. Wow. So, all right, you're in Humboldt, and for those of you that don't know, that's super, super, super up north in California, right?
Yes.
Is that as north as you can go?
No, you can go further north. We're like maybe an hour to 2 hours away from the Oregon border.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're in a very different environment than Los Angeles and like beaches. I mean, there's beach, there's ocean
Oh,
there
yes,
for
yes,
sure.
yeah.
But like, how does the environment, how does that like go into the education that you're learning there? How is it specific to Humboldt? And then how is it for you as a filmmaker, like just being surrounded by a very, very different landscape than LA?
It's very inspiring. I'll tell you that right now. It's very inspiring. Like being in like the redwoods and having like beautiful oceans, like coastal lines to go to and watch the sunset. You just think of stories, like either whatever it might be. It's just very inspiring for me. That's for sure. I did take a lot of hikes when I was there. I was hardly home half the time. I'm mostly in the library, like studying and like writing all my essays for like film classes and stuff, and doing all that, boring stuff.
Yeah, ChatGPT,
Yeah,
right? Fills that out. No, I'm just kidding. That
if
was
it
not
was
a thing.
around at
Yeah,
that time,
it wasn't a thing back then. Um,
um,
right, right. No, but I can imagine that, just from the photos and the videos that I've seen that you've showed me, because I've never been there myself. I just think it's beautiful. It's such a different landscape, and I know that there's so many film schools across the country, and people choose them for various reasons. But just thinking like environment like that, if I always think if I would have went to Humboldt, like how that would have shaped
l-
me as a filmmaker.
let me put it this way: your production value goes up tenfold up there. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff that we shot, even for my capstones, were in the forest. And that was a difficult challenge because at that time, I was trying to be what you are today, a DP. So I really liked cameras. So like as soon as like my first class, we were talking, it's like, oh, who wants to do the camera? Raise my hand. It's like, let me play with this. I don't know why, but I want to get my hands on a camera. And I was scared of cameras at first.
Right, they're
Yeah,
intimidating.
I was intimidated. I was like, fuck it, let's just take the bulls by the horn. So and since Humboldt was like a very small film school, there was not a lot of like budget or leeway. The classes are very small. I think we had maybe my capstone, like my senior class was maybe like 15 people or less. Um,
Wow,
yeah,
that's great though. Like that allows you to get very intimate with your professors and the lessons, and this is like a wonderful segue into the next question. And it's like, how did the classes that you took at Humboldt, how did they influence you as a filmmaker? Was there any class that stood out? Was there a film that you were shown that was like new to you? Um, yeah, could you elaborate on that?
yeah. There's a couple classes that stood out to me. Um, One was this was like my senior year, and it was my theory class. Like I never really dug into theory, but I had a professor. Her name was Michelle Cartier. She's a doctor, Dr. McCartier. She's probably one of the best like professors out there in Humboldt. She's very smart. She's really into the theory stuff. So when I took her theory class, again, it didn't really click to me until the end of the semester, and like I was like, oh, I get it, cause like theory at that time in like filmmaking, like I was dumb, like I was like, I don't know, I don't like my brain's not put connecting the dots here. So I would go to, after class and go to her office and like, hey, like I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? So she'll explain it to me and like, oh, okay, okay. And I slowly, by the end of the semester, I just fell in love with theory. I was like, oh, whoa, you can add so much to a film, and people won't even know it unless someone's looking for it. I think I do that with a lot of my films too, is I put a lot of like references in my films. So to see if someone can pick it out, just like, oh, I see what he did. Like my target audience for like my experiments was very niche. So, and then the next class was a multicam class for television production. Fell in love with it. I loved it. My professor was Howard Ritter. He was a professional for like 40 years in the industry. He did like Night Court and a bunch of other directing. He started as a cue card holder. Um, so
So wait, no film school for that guy?
I don't think he went into film school. Oh no, he did. He did. He did. He got his master's. Yeah, that's why he was teaching. So he got his master's. Yeah. So he retired up in Humboldt. Um, but he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about the industry, but he's an old industry head. So he taught me a lot of the old stuff, but it was very valuable as soon as I moved down to LA. So after taking that first class, the next semester, I asked him, hey, can I be your assistant? Like, and he's like, yeah. So I was helping him put everything together, binders and stuff. And like, I was learning actually like Hollywood stuff from him, which like at the time I was like, oh, I'm just helping him out, because I like this. This is fun. Like I want to be I want to be around this all the time. So that's why I asked him, like, can I be your assistant? So I was learning from him big time.
No, that's so cool. Like, so you were one of the students who saw the value in that professor and what they were teaching you and what they had to share with their experience. Was there any other students that did that reached out to professors? And like, what is your take on, if you're a student, like how important is it that you make that connection?
Very important. Very important. Like I didn't really see other students do it as much, I think, as much as I am, but I couldn't tell you because like I don't really we didn't have that conversation, right? Like it's like, oh, I just met up with professor or whatever, or like, we don't we're just like we're just in it at that moment, so we didn't really talk about it. I hope they did. If they didn't, they missed out, which is unfortunate case, because I learned a lot from these two people, big time, especially even the head of the department, Ann Alter. She's an amazing filmmaker. She's a documentary filmmaker. I still talk to her till this day. From time to time, we'll have Zoom meetings and I'll catch her up of what my life is. And last time I was in Humboldt, I went to visit her. So she's a really great teacher. A lot of the teachers out there are really good, and they really want us to like perform well, even though our program at the time wasn't the best. You know. Um,
So with that in mind, with you just saying that you didn't feel the program was the best, like, did you feel you wanted to do filmmaking, so you switched over, and luckily Humboldt had a film program. When you were in it, did you feel like you were missing out? Like, do you feel like the knowledge that you got, the experience that you got, would it be any different at another school or a bigger school or however you want to say?
Possibly. It's like, honestly, and I think because me and you, we talk to a lot of people about like industry and where their school we from. And I was a big opponent when I met someone like, oh, you went to school. What was your experience like? What's different out there? It's like, oh, you just focus on one thing. So I was like, I had to like put like 1,000 hats on in Humboldt.
Right, man, and I think that's so cool and so unique. Like, there are schools where you do focus on one thing, and in particular, I'm thinking of AFI. It's a conservatory school where you have to know what you're doing going into the school. So I think that's amazing that you learned everything, and it helped you become a well-rounded filmmaker at
Yeah.
that.
That is for sure. Yeah, because we're literally thrown in the fire. They're like, figure it out. Just make a film. And as long as it's due on time, you're good. You get a grade. So we're like, what should we do? And it's funny because we still have I still had, I don't know about anyone else in film school. I had like kind of that lazy mentality too. Like, oh, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And then the night before, I was like, oh, we got to make a film. We got to make a minute film. And it's due tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. All right. So me, a group of friends will get together and we'll all like work on each other's films. So we're like, all right, we'll shoot this for a little bit and then we'll shoot yours and then and then we'll all go into a little editing space and start editing and then the whole night and then turn in the next morning.
Right. This is that's always an interesting topic for me. Is like, what's the correlation between being a filmmaker and then also being a procrastinator? Because sometimes, I mean, a lot of my friends, and including myself, I'm a huge procrastinator for certain things. But I find my best work comes from that.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's the pressure of like getting something done, and I like being creative. Like, and then that's the biggest form of creativity is like last second stuff. Like how do I do this? I only got 6 hours to shoot this and like edit it together. What do I need to like do? How do I make a story in six hours? And I think that's really the fun part of it is like, and that pressure of that is just gets me super hyped. Like I have this feeling like, oh, okay, let's just fucking do it. Let's see what happens.
Right. And that's the magic of it,
Yeah.
for sure. Obviously that doesn't stay consistent as you throw money onto
Oh
projects,
no, yeah.
but I think you get a really strong foundation of how to be creative on a whim,
And with no budget
and with
either.
no budget.
Yeah,
Yeah, at a
literally no
very
budget.
early age and stage. So that's awesome. And I know that it seems like the professors that you had were quite credible in terms of like the pedigree of what they knew and what they were teaching. So with that in mind, after you graduated, did you feel like they supplied you with everything that you needed on your own path, heading into Los Angeles?
So yes and no.
Okay.
Like since it's a very small school up there and the film program is very small, only like a couple people worked in the industry, and the one of the biggest one was my professor Howard. So I got to learn a lot from him. So when I went down to LA after graduating, I found it really difficult, even actually just making my own films now. Since I don't have the safety net of school anymore or film school, which is something I had to realize like years later. But at the time I was like, why is this so hard? You know, and then when I did got my first like gig out there, it was DP work. It was for a fun project I'm actually doing this next weekend for a 48-hour film festival. So, and this was because of you, actually.
Oh no, what did I do?
You invited me to the CSUN Film Club Facebook group.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
yeah. So when I moved down to LA, someone posted they were looking for a DP. I was like, hey, here's my reel, and they're like, yeah, come on. But that was like my first like introduction to like LA filmmaking compared to my tiny experience in Humboldt, where like. And the reason why I say like yes and no is because at that job or that gig I did as a DP, I sadly do not learn from my mistakes. I kind of like, I don't know how to say the word, like took over the you know, because I was like, oh, let me get the shots, and I was like, let me come up with the shots, and that's something I learned in Humboldt is where, oh, the DP comes up with the shots and stuff like that. It's like, oh no, the director does.
Right. That's always so interesting. So many school of thoughts are different about
Yeah.
it. So that's really cool and unfortunate that you went through that experience. But yeah, go ahead and shed a little bit more light on that.
Yeah. So like, it wasn't until like after it was all done and like a month or 2 months later, it's like, hey, whatever happened? It's like, oh, they sent me the thing and they left my name out of the credits. I was like, oh, what's going on? And then like after like a while, I learned like, oh, I just fucked that whole production up, and I feel really bad about it.
No, yeah, that's crazy, and that's what's so cool and unique again about coming from a different school that's not in the hub of the industry. And that's not to say that if you're at a school that isn't at the hub, the things that you're learning is wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that film is is a is a thing that can be taught at very different degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And not always is one thing right and not always is one thing wrong.
There's someone that says like, oh, the rules of filmmaking. There's no rules. As long as you understand like the guidelines of filmmaking, you can break the rules anytime you want, as long as you know why you're breaking it.
Yeah, correct. And I think that holds so much value, because I remember when I was in film school and I was learning about, the rule of thirds and like, the three act structure and, there's the rule of threes in comedy.
Yeah.
And like, if, I remember just looking at films and seeing other people who were making things and they were breaking those. I was like, that's stupid. They don't know. Like I was just so pretentious
Yeah, no,
at
for
times.
sure. I feel like every film student is pretentious.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I've definitely been through my pretentious phase. It wasn't until I went to LA and got into like the industry, I'm like, oh shit, oh fuck, oh damn, okay, I didn't know shit.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. And again, that happens at at every level in every school. Like when I was at CSUN and I had graduated and I felt so confident in my
Yeah.
skills and my knowledge of like set life because I spent a lot of time on set at school.
Mhm.
I remember I got hired to do something as a DIT and I didn't understand those responsibilities because, believe it or not, it's
No.
hard for me to even believe. It was a newer thing. It
Yeah.
was a newer position.
And no one really teach you about organization in film school.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
unless you're like in the editing track,
yeah.
and then like maybe they teach it, but how deep do they go?
So my school they went in organization, but they didn't go too deep about it. There was like, just this is how you should file your stuff. Like dates first, blah blah blah. Like certain ways to date it. But in LA, and I started getting into like these production office filing name is way more complex.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what trips me out about film school in general,
Yeah.
and that's why so many people have made it in the industry without going to film school because film school will teach you the basics and will teach you the fundamentals of it.
Hmm.
But again, things evolve and change and continue to grow like in a professional setting
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I only learned this much from, and then now you're expected to do
Yeah.
five
So
more steps.
the way I can see it is like, maybe you agree or not, or maybe other people had the film school experience or not, is I feel like film school, you're just getting the tip of the iceberg. You know?
Absolutely. And I think it was like, I don't remember if this was on the podcast, if it made it on the one with Alex, but I was like, being in film school, and you'll totally understand this reference because you're an athlete as well. Being in film school is like training for the big super scrimmage.
Oh yeah,
Not
the
even the
big game
actual
day.
game. Like it is a game day, but it's like a scrimmage, right? You're making films, you're making your thesis
Yeah.
films, and they're at like the scrimmage level as an athlete.
Oh, for sure.
It's
Yeah.
not like
It's not. It's not. It's not state yet.
it's not
Yeah.
state, yeah, or it's not the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
So like when you go and you accomplish and you do those huge things, a thesis, it's only at a certain level because when you get to the industry, it's like, oh shoot.
Yeah. It's way more complex. And a lot of people might not see that. They only see the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. And I was fortunate enough to be able to see the whole iceberg. Which is crazy. Yeah, my experience from film school till now. I had a thought and I just lost it.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's gonna come to you.
It's gonna come back.
Yeah.
It's gonna come back.
And when it does, we'll be prepared for it. But I mean, my next topic or question is
Yeah.
gonna be like, now that we're years out of film school, like what have you been doing currently? And was film school necessary for what it is that you're doing and or like want to do?
I always had this like always in my mind, whether film school was like kind of worth it or not. Um, the best way I can say it, if it wasn't from film school, I probably wouldn't be in the position I am now. Um, give or take what that is, again, like everyone has a different path, but for me, if it wasn't through school, I probably never got the opportunities that I was able like to get.
Now, is that how much of a product of that, or a byproduct, I should say, of that is due to where we grew up, right? Like, imagine we knew where the film industry was and like what it is. Like, how would we navigate that without, like, would it be hard? Is it attainable? And if it is, like, how hard is that?
I think it would be very difficult because like as like film school students and like being like students of filmmaking, right? Like we really don't know too much. We have a good understanding because like everyone who's went to film, you're constantly looking for knowledge. So I spend most of my time on YouTube looking up like filmmaking stuff. I'm assuming you did too.
Same. I still do to this day.
Yeah, same. I'm constantly learning. And I feel like a lot of people who get out of film school stop learning. And I think that's where it stops because they've realized how hard it is to actually make a film without that safety net. And coming especially from our hometown, I think if I didn't go to college and I kept working at the hotel, I could have got like a manager job, climbed the ladder, but I would not been fulfilled at all.
Yeah, I know for sure. And like, I hate to say this statement or like think of it this way, but it can be said for sure. But like film school, if you're someone who doesn't live in a hub city where film is a thing, film school is almost kind of like the gatekeeper.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Cause like honestly, just in college in general, you know,
Yeah.
in general is a gatekeeper.
Thank you. Yeah, for expanding that, because
Yeah,
for sure it's not just film
it's not
school.
just film school; it's college in general. And the system we have in place is, not the best.
Yeah, so I mean, it's that the whole conversation of like the number one question that everyone gets about filmmaking and the film industry is like, do you need to go to film school? And like, I had this conversation with Alex, and it was like we talked about Quentin Tarantino,
Okay.
and it's like, oh yeah, he didn't go to film school,
Yeah.
but that man was possessed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like there wasn't anything in the
Nothing's
world.
stopping him.
Yeah, and he grew up like watching films and being in an
Oh
environment
yeah.
where
He's a
like
big. He's a big film buff.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like film was in his culture, like a family
Yeah.
thing. Where for us it just didn't
Wasn't.
exist.
Yeah.
So like if we wanted to get to where we are today or even further, on our own would be so hard.
It would be hard. It would be difficult. You would be constantly banging your head against the wall, and the percentage of you making it is very low. Unfortunately, the reality is, right.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is.
Unless you're just doing it just for fun, then go by means. But if you're looking at it as a career, I would say either save all the money that you're making through work and fund your first project. But at least you have, that creative control and like what you do. Not quite know what you're doing, but you have somewhat of like a learning experience. Like if you didn't want to go to film school and like spend all that money, you can raise all that money that you would go for film school and then use it on a project. But again, film school does give you that foundation. But if you're someone that's just like, I don't care, I'm just gonna do it. Go right ahead. You don't need film school because if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it no matter what.
You're gonna find a way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, for sure. I love that sentiment. And so, with that in mind, for people who are like interested in filmmaking but maybe don't want to go to film school, can't afford to go to film school in situations where they can't, like what are some best practices or exercises that they can do to strengthen their knowledge as a filmmaker to get better?
I would say figure out what you want to focus on. Really figure out what you want to focus on. I think that's the biggest thing because like you can do everything and like do all that, but if you don't know what you really want to focus on, you're not really gonna grasp of like to master it. Lucky for me and you, like we were able to like do a lot of hand stuff and stuff, so we got to learn a lot of stuff. But we focus on one thing in particular. Like I went from being trying to become a DP to quote a producer mostly and director now. Like way off from what I wanted to do.
Right. No, that's true. But um, so yeah, finding out what you want to do is huge for sure.
Yeah.
And
If you're on the fence of like going to film school, research. That's all you have to do. Just research. Research of like if there's something you really want to do. I would recommend film school. Um, I would recommend it because you do get the safety net of like getting equipment and stuff like that. But the biggest advantage, you have like-minded people who want to do the exact same thing you want to do. So instead of you setting up a camera by yourself and doing 100 takes trying to get that perfect shot, now you have someone behind the camera and be like, hey, can you do this? Focus. Cool, we got in 2 shots. Let's move on. And then a lot of interesting conversations come out of those classrooms. Like, oh, did you watch that movie? What'd you think about it? And then you like start really thinking about the filmmaking process. And the other big aspect of film school is networking. Networking is huge. Don't think about like, oh, I'm going to school. Think about it, oh, I'm going to network and meet a lot of cool people. After we're done graduating, we're gonna all go different paths, and we're all gonna end up bumping in one another. Whether you're a filmmaker, business, everything kind of like combines into one in filmmaking.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you had an experience in Los Angeles where you met someone who had either went to Humboldt,
Yes.
and like how cool is that? Like that's the payoff. Like when that moment happens, you're like, oh shit, of Humboldt, or you went there. Like,
Yeah. It was wild. We had a few people that would come up to Humboldt to talk and like, hey, we came here. We're gonna like show our experience. Like one was the DP, one was the director. Some of them are now in like big production like stuff. So like I follow them on Instagram or like we'll have a meetup down in LA. So like all alumni will come and like, hey, hang out and stuff like that. Unfortunately, none of that went anywhere because I was in survival mode when I was like meeting all these. I didn't really had the wherewithal to be like, hey, can I like join you on set? you know, kind of like I never like thought about like asking. Big thing, ask. Worst thing you get is a no.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's so cool. Again, that's the payoff. Like when you're just in the industry or you're just trying to find your footing after graduating, and then you run into someone who either is familiar with the school that you went
Yeah,
to or actually went there. And then it's like, wow, you have this bond that you just wouldn't have.
especially for Humboldt too, because it's very small. Not
Yeah.
a lot of people, and then the program was dead for a long time before it came back up again. So when you find someone's like, "Oh, I went to Humboldt too. Oh, so what you film? Oh, no shit. Okay," and then you start talking, you know. But there's a lot of people in the industry that went to a lot of big colleges in LA. So a lot of the people that you're working with all went to college together.
Right. Which is awesome. And
Yeah.
they share that
Networking,
shared experience. Networking.
networking,
Yeah.
yeah, big.
Huge. So, now that we're on the other side of film school and you've had years, in the industry, trying to find your footing, trying to make progress, like learning the things that you did outside of school, how like of that knowledge, how would you add that to like a college curriculum? Like what things would you take and be like, "Oh shoot, I didn't learn this, but it would have been really cool to have been at least like."
And I think that depends, because on schools, right? Each like a lot of the LA schools are very, you got to know what you want, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Up there is like kind of open range, so it all depends. For me, and this is maybe because like I'm producing now, is a little more producing like knowledge. Like, what does it actually take to produce a short film or put something together? Like, what is an actual budget? And that's something they kind of touched on. It's like, oh, if you're doing your short films, like make a fake budget. And I'm like, no, just do it, you know? But they never really had it. But if it was something I would say, like, yeah, how to make a movie from A to B, I would like, if they're a producing class, I would structure it as a producing class. And as the film like classes, like film 101, film 2, 3, 4, those producers in that producing class will have to get with the people from the filmmaking class and be like, hey, we send a script, we'll read the script, and we'll do the whole from development to like bottom to top. So you get the script, they read it, they're like, is this feasible? Can we do it? What's the budget? Have the students do like a budget. And so like, and then choose the script based on the budget, if it's feasible or not. I think that would help 10 times to all like filmmakers is how do you make a film from production to end as a producer.
Right. No, that's awesome. Because there's always ways to improve. And again, film school is not the be all end
Yeah,
all.
no,
It's,
definitely not.
it's just a,
It's
a
it's where
structure
you
foundation.
where you can make mistakes and not feel bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, yeah, and not just feel so terrible
Yeah.
for it, for sure. For sure. So like the films that you're making yourself nowadays, how is that, how's that, I can't talk, word vomit.
Yeah.
How did that
I get
like?
those a lot.
I know, right? It was a lot. Gee whiz. How did that come to fruition? Like, were a lot of the things that you're doing now were they practices? Were there glimpses of it at film school? Um, yeah. Was there any influence at all? Because I know that the films that you make are incredible. Like I'm a fan of what you do, but they're very unique, and it could be just to yourself. But
Yeah.
again, it could be from practices that you learned in film school.
The best way um I can say it, and this is like something like I thought about, is learn on every production you're on. Learn anything you can, no matter what it is. And a lot of the stuff is like learn what not to do. That's big. If you're a PA or whatever, just sit in the cut and just watch and just listen and like, oh shit, something happened, and figure out, and then like keep your ear close because they're creative ways to fix things. And if you're not really paying attention, I feel like a lot of PAs on like the industry don't really pay attention to what's going on. They're just there for a job. We're doing this, They're probably thinking of their own projects, you know. But I find it very key just to look, listen, ask a lot of questions. When I was working on network television in the production office, I made sure to go to every department and see if they're okay, see how they did stuff. And then as my career went into more further in, and I started like leaning into more producing, I would ask like people in departments. I was like, so what do you think is like the disconnect between producers in your department? So I got a lot of insight on that area. It's like, oh, this department don't like producers because of this, and like, oh, and you like transpose like, I talked to one of the transpo guys on one of his TV shows I was working on. And I was like, what do you think? Asking that question, he's like, they don't know how much time it takes to get things set up. So I was like, oh, okay, it's good to know. So I'm rambling, but
No, this is a
yeah,
great. I was gonna say,
yeah,
but honestly, this was so good because I have experiences where I was on set outside of school during my time at CSUN, and I dropped the ball. Like there was a time I showed up on set, and this is probably super rudimentary, but again, like if you're just paying attention and you're reading the room, like I was a camera PA, and I showed up to this No, I don't think it was America's Got Talent, but I think it was.
Was it like a Disney thing, right? You're on?
That's one experience
Oh,
for
okay.
sure, that we could jump into. But this one
Yeah. Okay.
specifically, it was American Idol, I want to say.
Nice, okay.
And I was just in the camera department, but I
Yeah.
showed up in a white button-up shirt. And camera department is, like you have to
You're
wear black.
Yeah.
And the guy looked at me who was in the camera department and was like, "Do you have another shirt? Like you can't."
Yeah, you're putting light onto my
Yeah.
talent. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my
Extra
head,
light,
in my head, I'm like, "Oh, I'm writing this way. If I'm a film student, like
Yeah.
I know my stuff. I'm just in the camera department because I'm new." And then I got super humbled and I had to go change my shirt and I felt like an idiot.
Yeah. No, I feel that. Yeah, that's some. I don't know if they taught you that in film school. Or like you have to wear all black.
Oh, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, a byproduct
yeah,
of being
that's
at
fair.
film school
Yeah.
is just like, dude, I know this stuff.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like,
Yeah. I think that's also I had that aspect of like going into initially like, oh, it's gonna be just like film school. And it's not.
it's
Uh,
oh yeah,
as you get into the more professional stuff, it's there's camaraderie as like friends of filmmaking and like like college friends, but it's way different, you know.
yeah. Like people are there because they're getting paid. Like this is like paying their mortgage. This
Yeah.
is like feeding their kids,
This
and
is not fun anymore.
yeah, and that's how I showed up to set, dude. I was like, "Yo, what's up, man?"
Then the film industry is not fun anymore.
Yeah, I was like, I look like Roger Deakins. Like he
Yeah.
does this. Why can't I do it?
It's like, Yeah, no, that's fair.
So there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Again, it's that whole analogy that I said. Like college, you're in film school. You're training for the big scrimmage.
Yeah. I like that. I like because we both did sports. I like using sports analogy and like or any analogy I can get. Like when someone's like, "Oh, what's film industry like?" and I tell them like, "Have you ever worked retail before?" Most people say no, because in LA, a lot of people who are in the industry don't really work retail at all. They were just already in it. Oh, but nonetheless, but if someone that's out asked me, I was like, it's like working at a retail, like, but the customer never leaves, you know, because you're dealing with so many egos, so many people.
That's
like,
true.
Depending on how big the production is, you have like 200 plus people.
Yeah. No, for us. Yeah, I haven't been on a set like that, but I know that you've been and you've seen things like that. So that's so cool that you can share a bit of that knowledge and.
Yeah. But to like full circle to answer your question, yeah, each production I've been on, I do take a lot into consideration into my own projects. So if I saw someone that did something wrong that should have been done, I was like, okay, don't do that. Or if someone said did something right, I was like, oh shit, that's cool. Put it in the bank for later. So when it comes to Rise, I'm like, I know how to fix that, and that's the big thing on like these bigger budget like productions is like time is money. If you can't figure something out in like an hour, then we just probably wasted like 10 grand or something like that. Yeah, something crazy.
Yeah, no, and I love what you said too. Is like when you're on set, it's just pay attention to how people are solving problems, how departments are working.
And set office, no matter wherever. If you want to be like super interested in one like one aspect, you don't have to know everything, right? You can just focus on one thing in the industry and just really hone in on that. But if you really want to understand filmmaking, you need to pay attention to every aspect in each department, and then put yourself out there, meet all these people, and ask them questions when the time is right. Like you're not gonna go when someone's stressing out because like they didn't get the 5-ton grip truck in time, or like there's no parking, and so like you're like, hey, what you do? What you doing over here?
Right, you got to read the room,
Yeah.
and that's something that I'm still learning because I don't personally have that many hours clocked in on set, especially at those bigger levels. So that's something that you won't necessarily learn at film school because it's just different. Like the stakes are so low.
So low, yeah. It's film school is there to fail fast. That's
Yeah,
pretty much film
right.
school, yeah. Fail fast as possible. So by the time you're like a certain age or like past film school, you're like, okay, I can run a smooth production now. Like I'm not wasting like 2 hours on like setting up lights or what it's like 5 minutes. Or if something happens, like, oh, I know how to fix that. You just do this. If it's not, then I think that's where the procrastination of us coming in of like shooting a film like within 6 hours before it's due. So if something does happen on set, it's like, oh shit, we got to like be creative and figure it out. So how fast we can do this? So you start throwing out ideas and stuff like that, and like you get people together, and you're like, oh, with what could have took like almost an hour and a half, just took 20 minutes. You know.
No, I love that, man. That I think that's a great way to end the podcast is and a great takeaway is just fail fast.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it like that, but film school totally is that.
Yeah.
And it gets you a chance to learn as quick as it possibly can at the level that you're at, so that you have a foundation.
You have a good foundation, and so when you're out there, you're like, okay, I can do this, but also I'm still gonna fail fast as much as possible, even outside of film school.
Right.
Because we're always learning. We're filmmakers.
Oh, yeah.
The game's always changing.
Right. No, for sure. Dang, dude. I appreciate the time and the knowledge that you dropped. And it was cool to learn a little bit more about your experience. So I'm excited and looking forward to the things that you do, the things that we do in the very near future. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in. And, again, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And just like that, we have made it to the other side of the podcast. I hope that you guys learned something about Marcos and his experience at a smaller film school. Again, in my opinion, I don't think you need to go to the #1 film school or the #4, the #10. As long as you go to film school, there is so much to learn, and you can translate all of your learnings from that film school to an actual film set. Now, information may vary from school to school, but you will have the basis and the fundamentals and foundation of what filmmaking is and how to accomplish things. Of course, you're going to be learning how certain people do certain things, and maybe things are not the same as they were back at your school, but at the end of the day, all you have to do is communicate how you want certain things to be done, and then you're all set, ready to go. Now, depending on what film school you go to or you went to or you are currently thinking of going to, something else to keep in mind is the environment of where that school is at. Many of the top film schools are, of course, in Los Angeles, which makes sense, but don't forget there are so many other film schools in this country, heck, even in the world, and the environment and the location that you are at really dictates how you learn, what you learn, and then how you take what you learn and then go out and film and make a movie or a short film all about that. So location, 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 that's been said numerous times, which I'm sure you are aware of when it comes to filming, and it goes to say it's the same exact thing when it comes to picking a film school. So think about the location, think about what that location can do for you and how it can expand or grow or even motivate you to be a better filmmaker. And at the end of the day, find your voice as a filmmaker, which of course, is most important. Well, thanks again for tuning into this week's podcast. Again, I hope you took something valuable with you from this conversation. Huge shout out to Marcos for this. Be sure to check us out on YouTube if you want to see the video representation of the podcast. Of course, the quality is like peanuts, but that's the beauty of this podcast. Doesn't matter where we're at. I will film it. I will record it. You can watch it on YouTube. You can listen to it on your favorite podcast station. And then also, there is so much more information going into the Patreon account as we are speaking, so stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to expand on that and share some of our guests' work that they have done in film school and also outside of film school. We will be breaking down some of their projects, so I'm really excited for that, and I hope you are as well. But like I said, until we meet again, I will see you on another episode of the Film School Experience.